This video is a critique which is considered fair use under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. I do not own any of these clips. This is simply fan-made for entertainment purposes only. Spongebob is owned by Nickelodeon Studios, Steven Hillenburg, Viacom, and Paramount Television. Enjoy! Am I really doing this? I mean, do I even need to do this list? This is probably the most done top 10 worst list ever. I mean, while Family Guy took a big drop in terms of good episodes, it can still shoot out a few entertaining episodes here and there. Hell, some of the episodes on my top 10 worst Family Guys list, even they could be entertaining. Like, not to me, yeah, but I can see why some people would find them entertaining. SpongeBob's drop is flat out historical. It's the Great Depression of animated shows. I mean, some of the episodes are not only bad, they are scarring. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if some people are now mentally unwell because of these episodes. So, I recommend not even bothering with this video. You're still here? You know, the last time I made a top 10 worst episodes list, it was so long that I had to break it down into 2 parts, right? Really? You're still watching? Alright, well, I guess I have no choice. So, might as well state the rules, I guess. The rules are that these episodes need to be regular episodes. So, therefore, I'm cutting out special episodes like Atlantis Squarepants, Best Day Ever, Who Bob What Pants, and Truth or Square, for example. But everything else is fair game. And trust me, cutting out those episodes still left me with so many episodes to choose from. Well, I guess that's it. Remember, you could have left, but you didn't. Enjoy. Number 10. Boating Buddies. This episode is just uncomfortable to watch. Like, this is literally the start of it.
Gary, can you hear that? Oh, Squidward, it's you! I thought I heard something.
SpongeBob, I've been sitting here motionless for 45 minutes. What could you possibly have heard me doing?
Breathing.
How obsessed do you have to be with the person that you need to bother them just for breathing? Now, in the earlier episodes, SpongeBob would bother Squidward completely inadvertently. It'd be through reasons like he was building a bubble stand and the noise was driving Squidward crazy. Or him and Patrick would be making too much noise from having fun and minding their own business. It was never deliberate, and that's why it worked. Here, it doesn't work because it's completely deliberate. SpongeBob is literally going out of his way to bother Squidward for doing absolutely nothing. Well, Squidward ends up trying to get away from SpongeBob and ends up running into a stop sign.
Can I help you, officer?
No.
Now, giving credit where it's due, this is actually kind of funny. Squidward is put into boating school with SpongeBob, and SpongeBob once again bothers him, but it's even creepier this time.
Would you like to tell the rest of the class why you're with us today?
Why, I'm...
Now, so far, SpongeBob has ruined his driving record, ruined his weekend, and Squidward even ends up picking a fight with the big guy he mistakes for SpongeBob and gets beat up. And as a result of getting beat up, he can't complete his test and needs to come back next weekend, and I'm sure this cycle just kept on going.
But we'll meet again next week at Mrs. Puff's boating school.
All of this stuff happens to Squidward for literally doing nothing. Just fuck this episode and fuck the hatred on Squidward, because this poor guy has clearly had enough. Oh, but it's not gonna stop there, my friends. We're just getting started. Number 9. Squid Baby. This episode is the most uncomfortable thing I've ever watched. It focuses around Squidward suffering a head injury and basically becoming a baby. Now, what makes this episode so awkward is, well, how do the nostalgia critics sum up Food Fight again? That's what this episode is. That's all this episode is. It's a fetish episode. Believe it or not, it's called paraphilic infantilism, which basically means adult baby syndrome.
Your friend has a condition known by the medical term of head-go-boom-boom-itis.
Oh, how fucking subtle. They actually give Squidward an actual disease. They knew what they were doing. Now, I get that the idea of this episode was just to make humor out of the fact that Squidward is now a grown baby, but it's nothing short of awkward and almost perverted.
Sorry, Squidward, I was gonna change you, but I got interrupted.
Seeing Squidward spend damn near the entire episode in a diaper and SpongeBob and Patrick treating him like a baby, as well as acting like babies themselves, it's just unsettling. It feels like I'm watching something I shouldn't be watching, like someone's home role-playing sex tape or something. On top of that, SpongeBob and Patrick need to take care of Squidward as if he was an actual baby. But they treat him like a punching bag. But because they talk like this,
Ready for some fun?
somehow they thought that'd be acceptable. God, I'm gonna need therapy after this. I don't even need to go any further. It's a disgusting episode, and it's clear that someone needs to get their issue sorted out. Besides me! Number 8. Demolition Doofus. This episode shares the exact same problems as Play It Again Brian from Family Guy. You know, minus a rape attempt anyway. Because this episode puts two characters in the wrong and expects you to sympathize with one of them. In this episode, SpongeBob causes an accident that results in Mrs. Puff being crippled, and while at the hospital, SpongeBob makes a tasteless joke about it.
From now on, I guess we'll have to call you Mrs. Pop.
That's just sickening. I mean, that's shameful. Well, Mrs. Puff ends up snapping and actually plots to kill him. I'm not even joking. She literally plots it.
I could finally be rid of SpongeBob. Forever! And I mean that in the worst possible way.
What's so funny?
I just thought of a way that you can earn some extra credit.
See, Mrs. Puff has every right to react this way,
Why can't you just graduate out of my life?
but to actually plot the death of one of her students, it's not justified. It's just psychotic. It's psychotic. That's probably the best way to describe it. I mean, it's one thing to put that in a show like Blue Bloods or Dexter or something. I mean, it would fly there. But putting something like that into a kid's show? I mean, there's a fine line to how you should handle your problems, and suggesting that murder is an option isn't exactly the best lesson, and it really hurts this episode. Well, SpongeBob, of course, does incredibly well in the Demolition Derby, and Mrs. Puff the whole time keeps screaming how she wants him to die.
Mrs. Pop, what should I...
Why are you still alive?
Eventually, she tries to kill him herself and chases him throughout town like a fucking maniac.
You're blocking my view!
I mean, I can't even tell who the protagonist is. SpongeBob was uncaring about crippling her for life, but she's going out of her way to kill him. At this point, I just can't help but question if the writers were just trying to let out some serious rage. Oh god, let's just move on before I go the way of Mrs. Puff and explode from anger. Number 7. I'm with Stupid. Now, this is the only pre-movie SpongeBob episode I'll be putting on this list. And this episode, I saw it when I was like 7, and I remember it making me feel sick. This was the first bad SpongeBob episode I ever saw, and I spent weeks rewriting it in my head. The episode focuses around SpongeBob acting stupid so Patrick will look smart to his parents, who think he's an idiot.
SpongeBob, my parents think I'm dumber than a sack of diapers.
Which he is, but that's beside the point. See, SpongeBob acting stupid is actually pretty funny. But what makes this episode so bad is the way Patrick himself handles it. He treats SpongeBob horribly, and it's just disturbing seeing him treat his best friend the way he does for just trying to help.
You let up on the insults just a little bit?
Oh, were those too complicated for you?
I'm only pretending to be dumb. It was our plan, remember?
Oh, SpongeBob, if only you could see how stupid you sound right now with your talk of imaginary plan.
And I get that Patrick's an idiot and forgot that SpongeBob was faking, but does that mean he would shame SpongeBob like this if he was actually stupid? Like he'd actually treat him in the same manner he hated his parents treating him? It's hypocritical and it's just unforgivable in my opinion. I mean, just look at this scene here.
Amazing! 3 minutes in the kitchen and our son has taught him to talk in complete sentences. Oh, good work, son.
It wasn't easy, Dad.
I'm not dumb. I have a brain. See? Here's a picture of it.
That must be actual size.
Oh, now he's short-circuiting. You must have taught him a little too much.
That's just horrible. Again, all SpongeBob was doing was helping his best friend. And now, his best friend and best friend's parents are bullying him. And it's ruthless almost. It's just unfair to him. And this is before SpongeBob was what he is now. So that makes it even worse because he was actually likable in this episode. Pre-movie SpongeBob may have had some of the best episodes of SpongeBob, but this episode certainly shows that they had ways of making bad ones even then. I mean, if you give it better animation, you would think it's from season 7 or something. It's just a mean-spirited, underwritten, horribly executed mess.
That's just what I'd expect you to say. Dumb people are always blissfully unaware of how dumb they really are.
Excuse me? Go fuck yourself, you fat fuck. Number 6. To Love a Patty. I'm really concerned about the mindset of SpongeBob. I mean, this guy clearly has some sort of mental issue. And if you don't see it, you will after watching this episode. In this episode, SpongeBob makes a perfect Krabby Patty, but he doesn't want to give it up, which alone is just out of character for him, but he literally ends up falling in love with it. Like, he actually takes it out on dates, celebrates an anniversary with it. Hell, there's even this scene.
What's cooking there, Patty? Oh, are you kidding? I love crepes.
Okay, you know SpongeBob set that patty up to do that. Like, he's literally losing sense of what's real. Well, things get even more disturbing when SpongeBob takes his Krabby Patty out to the park, where a bunch of scallops, which, by the way, are birds in this universe, end up trying to eat it. And SpongeBob fucking kills them all. Yeah, it's not even hidden. You know he's killing these things. This is like watching someone stomp birds to death.
We had a deal!
And it's even more disturbing when you remember that SpongeBob and Patrick once nursed a baby scallop back to health. So there's a good chance that SpongeBob may have just killed it. Wait a minute. Losing sense of reality, out of character moments, psychotic tendencies, questionable attractions, murdering animals. This is a Criminal Minds episode. This is a straight-up episode about a lunatic losing his sanity and going on a rampage. The only difference is that Hotch doesn't come in and blow him off the face of the earth, which is probably the only thing that would have saved this episode. You know what, though? How fitting that this is a Criminal Minds episode, because that's the perfect metaphor to how I'm feeling doing this list. Like, I'm losing my sanity with each fucking scene. My only hope is to get this over with as quick as possible before I fucking snap as well. Number 5. Someone's in the kitchen with Sandy. Now, if there's one thing that will always infuriate me in any show ever, it's by punishing characters for no reason. I mean, this episode is basically If It Smells Like an Ed levels of infuriating in terms of punishing people for no reason. But it's worse than If It Smells Like an Ed because it also mixes in an offensive amount of gross-out humor. I mean, watching Sandy eat in extreme close-up and seeing her without her fur is just repulsive. But the fur pelt itself is just creepy. It looks like something you'd see in a horror movie. But anyway, Plankton ends up stealing Sandy's pelt in order to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula. And everyone, because they're idiots in this episode, believe it's Sandy.
No, Sandy is herself. No reason to be suspicious in any way, y'all.
Well, as long as there's no reason to be suspicious.
I mean, SpongeBob is able to point out that Sandy's not wearing her suit, but by this point, SpongeBob wouldn't be stupid enough to not realize that she would need that to survive.
If it wasn't for that suit, you couldn't even live down here.
You're not wearing your spacesuit and helmet!
Yeah, that's, 'cause I just breathe underwater now. It's as simple as that.
Well, maybe he would. I don't know. I wouldn't put anything past SpongeBob anymore.
The gooey freshness that is the Krabby Patty Patty.
Oh, and by the way, you want to see a perfect example of how stupid they are? Just watch this.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it out here while they clean out the safe.
Yes, they literally just saw Plankton jumping around in the pelt and still believe it's Sandy. I mean, there's making someone stupid for the sake of the episode, and then there's just writers trying to troll you. This is a troll. The writers, I think, were trying to see how much idiotic stuff they could stuff into one episode. Well, while this is going on, Sandy tries to get her pelt back, and she keeps getting laughed at for being naked, which alone is just annoying to watch. But this is the stuff I can't stand.
A nudist ferret! Get in the car, kids!
It's not my fault!
What was going through the writer's mind to think that this is funny or enjoyable to watch? I mean, Sandy looks absolutely miserable, and you actually feel depressed watching what she goes through. Well, Sandy ends up getting her pelt back from Plankton, and she actually punishes him for what he did.
My eye! This condiment is highly irritating to my eye!
And if the episode ended here, it wouldn't be on this list. But no, they gotta end on one of the worst notes SpongeBob has ever ended on.
We'll take that sicko off your hands.
Cops! Thank goodness you're here! Take the sicko away!
Actually, we're referring to you, ma'am.
Yes, that's how it ends. Sandy gets called a sicko and gets arrested after being made fun of and threatened. And all of this happens to her for absolutely no reason. This episode is just amazing. Its levels of bad are through the fucking roof. And keep in mind, it's only number 5. Oh, God. Number 4. Pet Sitter Pat. Now, I'm just going to say it. Patrick Star is one of my all-time least favorite characters. In fact, I think I hate him more than Brian from Family Guy. And if you want to see a prime example of what makes Patrick so ungodly horrible, it's this episode. In this episode, SpongeBob goes to his grandma's house to celebrate her birthday, and he leaves Patrick to look after Gary.
You got it. He's safe with me.
Good choice, SpongeBob. Well, as if you can't tell by that scene alone, Patrick practically tortures Gary. I mean, he dries Gary out, talks about pouring salt on him, almost drowns him, and even chases him with a flamethrower.
Well, make up your mind. Is it water or fire?
Okay, you know what this is? This is a video straight from the fucking deep web. I mean, I literally feel like I'm watching a cat get abused and tortured by a sick, fat redneck. Well, SpongeBob ends up realizing something's wrong and goes back home to check on Gary. And he finds this.
Ah, reading Patrick a bedtime story, I see.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Seriously, what the fuck? I mean, I can't even make a possible explanation to what they were trying to do. Patrick spent the whole episode starving, maiming, and torturing Gary, and now Gary's reading him a bedtime story out of the blue. Like, what the fuck happened? This literally is the last scene with Gary and Patrick before this.
Oh, yeah.
I really believe this episode was written by some kind of dude with multiple personality. I mean, I apologize if that's a bad analogy, but that's what it feels like. It goes from an episode full of torture and Gary scared and angry at Patrick to, oh look, Gary and Patrick are best friends, what a lovely episode. Okay, that's it. I'm making an appointment to see a therapist. Thank you, SpongeBob. You just destroyed whatever sanity I had left. Well, might as well finish this list. I mean, I can't go even more insane, right? Number 3. Okay, before I reveal number 3, I gotta acknowledge this. The writers of these last few seasons of SpongeBob really know how to throw in offensive subject after offensive subject. I mean, so far, we've had fetish episodes, we've had criminal minds episodes, we've had psychopath episodes, we've had dark web episodes. I guess all that's left is a suicide episode. Oh, that's right, they did 2 of those. No, let's go with the more controversial one. There we go. This episode focuses around Plankton being afraid of Pearl, Mr. Krabs' daughter, because whales eat plankton.
Do you remember what happened to my ancestors at the hands of those beasts?
Okay, first of all, Plankton's met Pearl before, and he's never been afraid of her. And secondly, yes, whales eat plankton. This is true. But you know what else whales eat? Crabs! Whales eat crabs too. Kind of awkward once you know that, isn't it?
She's a big girl, Plankton. I have no control over what she does. Oh, and you better watch out. I think she's extra hungry today.
Well, for your sake, I hope she's not craving shellfish, buddy.
Who knew Plankton was so afraid of whales?
Well, Mr. Krabs decides to use Plankton's fear to his advantage, and flat out stalks, harasses, and scares Plankton so badly, straight to the point where Plankton can't even leave the chum bucket, and he turns into this.
You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you bring it up? I can't risk stepping into the light. The whale might see me.
I mean, this is just depressing. It leaves you feeling so incredibly bad for Plankton. And Mr. Krabs, I mean, just the way he's handling it is demented. The constant living in fear drives Plankton to attempt suicide, which of course they handle as a joke.
Hi, Plankton. What you doing laying in the middle of the road?
Go away, cheesehead. Can't you see I'm trying to get run over? In fact, better yet, just step on me as hard as you can. Would you do that for me?
I'm sorry, Plankton, but that flies in the face of my good nature.
Forget it, kid. I'll just wait for the next bus.
And Mr. Krabs is absolutely thrilled that Plankton has hit this stage.
Really? He's a mess.
If there is someone in your life who you don't like, encourage them to commit suicide. Now, I've heard people argue that Plankton deserves this because he's a thief. Thieves do not deserve the death penalty. They don't deserve to suffer like this. And Plankton is a comedic bad guy. He's never going to succeed anyway, so how can you say he deserves something like this?
Really? He's a mess.
And you know what's even more shocking to me? It's that this episode had probably the easiest setup they could have done right. What do I mean by that? Well, there are numerous ways they could have made this episode go that not only would have worked, but would have made the episode humorous. Instead of scaring Plankton to death as much as possible when he doesn't do anything after being scared the first time, and then driving him to attempt suicide, Mr. Krabs could have hired Pearl as security or something. Or, dressed up like Pearl to scare Plankton every time he caught Plankton trying to steal his formula. I mean, that would have worked. It would have given him an actual reason instead of simply, oh, I'm going to scare the shit out of Plankton because I am a jackass who likes to watch him suffer.
Why, the conniving bottom feeder!
Oh, and guess who wins in the end? Yeah, Mr. Krabs. I mean, you can't tell me they weren't trying to imply that he's the good guy. This episode's moral is nothing more than, oh, well, Plankton's a thief, so Mr. Krabs has every right to drive him to kill himself. It's just mind-boggling to me they thought this was okay. So, yeah, that's about it. This episode is just sick, it's twisted, it's unfunny, and it's only number 3. Plankton, save a spot on the road for me, buddy. Number 2. Yours, Mine, and Mine. Now, there's a big reason I'm ranking this ahead of Pet Sitter Pat's. And that reason is, when Pet Sitter Pat aired, I already hated Patrick. That episode did not change my feelings for him. It more cemented him as one of my all-time least favorite characters. But Yours, Mine, and Mine is the episode that put him on my all-time least favorite characters list. In this episode, Patrick wants a Krabby Patty meal, but can't afford it. Shocker. So SpongeBob buys one for both of them to share. Or, excuse me, Patrick steals his money and calls it sharing, and then eats the whole meal and leaves none for SpongeBob. He then gets pissy because he wants a toy, and Mr. Krabs makes one on a whim and has SpongeBob pay for it. But Patrick takes it from SpongeBob, again calls it sharing, and then refuses to let SpongeBob play with it at all.
Now can I see it again, Patrick?
What? I thought we were sharing it!
When's my turn?
Aren't you supposed to be working?
I mean, in Pet Sitter Pat, you can use the Patrick's an idiot excuse. But here, you can't. Patrick is not doing this because he's an idiot. He's doing it because he's selfish. And he makes that very clear.
How about now?
No, maybe tomorrow.
Night-night, Patty Pal.
No touchy! See you tomorrow.
He keeps telling SpongeBob that it's not his turn to play with the toy, cards him when SpongeBob comes over to get the toy, throws this little tantrum when SpongeBob finally gets his hands on it.
Hand it over, Patrick. I get to play with the Patty Pal today.
You can't take it! It's not fair!
How about I only take it for half a day?
And even eats it because he doesn't want anyone else to have it. That's not stupidity, it's selfishness. It shows that Patrick is a terrible character with no sympathy and no compassion. And the episode ends with Mr. Krabs making them both their own toy, and Patrick stealing SpongeBob's money again to pay for them, and says this fucking infamous line.
Patrick, that's my money.
Have you learned nothing about sharing?
When I saw this episode, I actually threw something at the TV. It angered me that much. The way they portray Patrick and the way they end it with him not learning a fucking thing and getting away with being the most selfish asshole ever to his best friend is absolutely appalling. And it's even more so when you realize that it is very possible for a kid to see this and think this type of behavior is acceptable because the episode does not portray it as wrong. If anything, it portrays SpongeBob as being in the wrong for wanting to play with the toy that he bought. If this episode ended with SpongeBob getting a new toy, not Patrick, and SpongeBob refusing to let Patrick play with it, I'd be perfectly fine with that. And I shouldn't be fine with that. But in Patrick's case, after seeing this disgusting demonstration of being just a straight up asshole, it would be completely warranted. Fuck Patrick Star. Alright, well, it's time for honorable mentions. And trust me, I know I'm leaving a lot of episodes off of here too. But if I named all the horrible episodes of SpongeBob that I left off and why I left them off, this video will end up being 4 hours long. So I'm just going to narrow it down. Any of the gross out episodes. These episodes include Phase Freeze, The Splinter, House Fancy, and Pineapple Fever. The only reason I'm not including any of these episodes is because the episode Fresh Air from Family Guy was so disgusting, so unsettling, and so nauseating that none of these episodes can gross me out. As a result, they just become boring episodes. If I had to pick which one I'd put on the list to represent these gross out episodes, however, it'd be The Splinter. But because I made my Family Guy list first and suffered the horrible ordeal that is Fresh Air, none of these episodes affect me anymore. Stuck in the Ringer. Even I was shocked when I left this off the list, because nothing irks me more than seeing an episode where everyone acts like a hypocrite and someone gets tortured for no reason. I really have nothing to say other than I just found these other episodes worse. This was easily number 11 though.
I guess crying does solve your problems after all.
Dear Vikings. Alright, I'm going to shock a lot of people when I say this. I honestly don't think it's that bad of an episode. Okay, it's definitely not the best episode, and I can see why it's hated. I mean, it's very boring. But compared to all these other episodes, which are just sickening, offensive, nauseating, and unpleasant, I just don't think it holds a candle to them, if that makes any sense. Okay, let's just end the list and get to the worst episode of SpongeBob. Here it is, my number 1 pick. The most god-awful episode of any show I've ever seen, period. Number 1. A Pal for Gary. What do I need to say? No, really, what do I need to say? Everyone and their grandmother has talked about this episode. It's the Nicole Arbor of the SpongeBob episodes. The Star Wars The Phantom Menace of the SpongeBob episodes. Everyone's got to point out everything wrong with this episode. And for the most part, they have. But for like the two of you that have never seen this episode or a review of it, SpongeBob thinks Gary is lonely, which he's not, and gets him a pal, which he steals, by the way. No, really, he just grabs it and walks away while the person selling it is explaining how it shouldn't be around other pets.
Why bother? They never listen.
That's an issue, lady. Well, the pet, who SpongeBob names Puffy Fluffy, ends up horribly attacking Gary. Gary even tries to be friendly at one point, and the pet still attacks him right in front of SpongeBob, who does nothing, and instead blames Gary. Even when he sees Puffy Fluffy attacking Gary, he says this.
You put Fluffy down right now. Bad boy Gary. Bad boy, bad.
Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you!
Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
That right there is the most infamous scene in SpongeBob history. This right here changed everyone's view on him. And when Gary saves SpongeBob, SpongeBob still blames him and then makes poor Gary come to work with him.
Serve him up, snail!
Even though Gary enjoyed being alone when SpongeBob was at work. Now, what hasn't been pointed out as bad? SpongeBob's an asshole. Oh, God, that's been touched on by anyone who's seen this episode. Puffy Fluffy's a monster. Oh, that's been touched on. Gary's suffering for no reason. Oh, come on, who hasn't talked about that? It commits character assassination. Huh? That hasn't been touched on? Okay. I think I can add something that might be new now. Alright. The biggest issue with this episode, it's not SpongeBob being an asshole or Gary suffering for no reason. It's that it commits character assassination. Now see, SpongeBob was starting to get creepy at this point, yes. I mean, episodes like Boating Buddies and Choir Boys did air before this episode. Hell, To Love a Patty aired before this episode. But this episode was also before episodes like Demolition Doofus and Squid Baby. So, he was starting to become kind of an asshole, especially to Squidward, but he was still likable. He was still a gentle soul, he was still kind. Hell, in Stuck in the Ringer, which also aired before this, he's basically the one getting shit on. So I mean, he wasn't at the point of being a bad character just yet. And one of the few things that kept him from hitting that mark was that he seemed to genuinely care about Gary. So witnessing him treat Gary, his supposedly beloved pet, the thing that probably cares about him and puts up with him more than anyone, is just an injustice to what he used to be. It's without a doubt the biggest spit in the face to the character SpongeBob once was, and it completely killed the image of the Sponge we once loved. Not only that, if someone were to watch this episode as their first episode, they would never live it down. They would never watch SpongeBob again. They would never like the show. They would never know what made it great, unless they were a sadist maybe. Because this portrayal scars you. Even the people like me who've watched SpongeBob since its debut cannot overlook how this episode portrays him. I mean, even watching any other episode, I can't look at SpongeBob without remembering what he did to Gary. It's so sickening, it's so horrible, it's so devious, it's so offensive, it's so anti-SpongeBob that it deserves to be called the worst episode of the entire series.
Oh, hello. Are you a friend of Flubber?
Oh, God, it's finally over. Now I can move on to the next review. What's next, anyway? Oh, my God. Alright, well, I gotta do one thing first if I'm gonna talk about this, then. Yes, I'd like to schedule an appointment with one of your therapists, please. No, I don't care about the cost per hour. Oh. Thanks for watching. See you in the next review. Huh? My reason for the appointment? Well, I just did a top 10 worst episodes of SpongeBob list. You have a specialist for that?